let's try and jump in. I don't want to throw the timeline off. I know there's a lot of information tonight. Again, I'm Paul Durbon, Finance Director here at the school district. We have been having some conversations in our Finance Committee with the school board about maybe some foreseeable pressure points that we're going to run into as a school district as we're seeing some trends with enrollment and finances that that's kind of what's brought us together today. We know we're going to have to be making some, I'd say, difficult decisions as a school district, and the community voice is important, and it's going to help guide us as we move forward. And the longer we delay these types of conversations, and the longer we delay these task forces, the bigger the problem is going to get. And I'll try to highlight some of that for us this evening, and hopefully, one thing that we hear is that we're in a good place right now, but it's tough. We got to start talking about what's going on here. So three kind of things that we're going to look at from the district side, part of this data dump today. One, we'll talk a little bit about budget, not really deep, and then we'll talk about forecasting, what that looks like from the school's perspective, how are we coming up with these predictions or looking at the enrollment, and then just maybe a little bit more about some facilities that is just important information to maybe think about. And we're not going to reach some solutions or ideas. I mean, we generate ideas, but we're not going to come to conclusions tonight. We're going to probably send you some homework, generate some survey questions here as we move forward. Start thinking as a group here of some things that are going to help us with these topics, and then we'll build as we go. So I think it's really fitting that we landed in this room tonight. The original plan was to be at the field house. As you can see, this used to be a special services classroom that had a sensory swing mounted in it. And as we talk about the capacity study, when we moved the ALC over to this building last year, that completely changed our capacities. How we use the space is different. This is no longer a classroom that would count for a certain number of students. Now it's used as a cafeteria. Our ALC students will eat lunch and breakfast in this room. And I think it's turned out to be quite a nice space actually for meetings like this and community ed classes and kind of a multi-use space. But just a good little reminder of as we change and evolve as a district, these studies change too, right? So first topic, budget. This is something that I presented to our school board in the past. And typically when we talk about anything budget related, this concept comes up. Just like most public entities or nonprofits or people that serve others, we are mostly people-based. Our expenditures are mostly salaries and benefits. So as a school district, we've got about 80% of all of our expenditures are going to our staff. And if we talk reductions, and it's kind of a scary concept, the bulk of those reductions are made with staffing. And that's really hard. And everybody in here is invested in this school system and this community. And so when we talk about cuts, it's a really serious topic, right? When we look at supplies, materials, really small part. So when we cut back on supplies and materials, it doesn't have as much of an impact, right? We can really trim back there. And then the other part with that is that a lot of that burden then shifts to our community in other ways. Booster clubs, and people that make donations, or education foundation, right? So the next biggest piece of the pie is purchase services. That might be stuff like transportation. It might be our property insurance, things like that. So this slide, to be honest, I just off the top of my head threw out some formulas that I knew were driven by enrollment. And one thing that Sal had mentioned as she was talking was, as we think about capacities, it's important to think about student count, head counts, how many belly buttons are in seats, right? When we're talking about finances, it's really important to think that enrollment's different. Our revenue calculations are based on APUs, which is adjusted pupil units, which is based off of an ADM. Okay, so a lot of enrollment acronyms there. But an adjusted pupil unit is they're going to take your average daily membership, your ADM, for every student in your building. So if a student's here for, let's say, if we had, I'm just going to use a round number, 180 student contact days in the school year, I know we don't. But they're here for 90. We're going to get a 0.5 ADM for that student. okay? If they're here for 75% of the school year, we're gonna get a 0.75 ADM for that student. So ADMs are different than seat count. Seat count is more of a snapshot today, how many students do we have? That fluctuates through the year. Typically what we see, school year starts, we see students enrolling, especially as we get past Labor Day. Then we get to October 1, and then we see that enrollment decline through the end of the year. So we kind of ride that wave every year with enrollment, and that's what makes those projections tricky, right? That we kind of see some trends there. A big benchmark for us with enrollment is our October 1 MARS number, which is basically we're enrolling every student here in the school. They're on file with our MARS coordinator. That's who we send all of our enrollment data to at the state. And then we get an official report in January of what our fall enrollment was on October 1st. So they take all the calculations, how we're serving these students. They tell us what our ADM was in October. And then we try to make a projection for the end of year, what our enrollment will be based on prior trends. So right now, we're kind of in this awkward time where we don't have that October 1 back from the state. We'll get that this winter during this study, so it'll be fitting when that's official. We could probably firm up some projections as we talk a little bit too. So with all that, here's some ideas about revenue. Most of our revenue is driven by student enrollment. So our basic revenue formula has a formula allowance every year that changes based on statute. A lot of times they try to follow inflation with how they determine the next formula and how much we get per student. And then they'll multiply it by our APU, and then it'll generate revenue. And then we'll receive that through either aid or levy. Levy meaning from our tax base. Operating capital, same thing, it's based off an APU. Local optional revenue, off of an APU. We could go on and on and on. Education funding is based off of APUs. It's based on enrollment. So, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing, and we saw a taste of it with Sal's presentation, our enrollment trends are declining. We're seeing less, and this is not an Albert Lea problem, this is a statewide problem. Less children are being born, right? Birth rates are down. So, I want to kind of dispel a couple myths or rumors, or however you want to phrase it. There's kind of misnomers here about revenue with school districts, and just to help the group kind of think about enrollment and funding a little bit. So one is, we're seeing property values increase in our community. Okay, I personally think that's a good thing, but it can be a pretty heavy impact to people on their tax, right, on their taxes. So when property taxes increase, yes, our levy tends to increase, but what's truly happening is our revenue is flat. It's based on the students we have. What's happening is it's shifting the burden to our taxpayers locally. So if you own a property in our community, in our attendance area, your property values go up, your taxes go up. What's happening is you're taking on, if we go back to these formulas, you're taking on more of that burden than state aid. And then we get the rest in state aid. If our property values go down, state aid contributes more, our tax base contributes less. So I think one thing that people think is my taxes are going up, we're paying more for the schools, why aren't they using that money, all this extra money they're getting? Well, we're not getting any extra, right? It's pretty stable based on those APUs. So, and I'll tell you those formulas, they're not keeping up with our increased expenditures in inflation. And I can try to hit that a little bit too. The other one is, why can't we just set the levy then to meet our needs? And in a school system, if we want to increase our levy, that would mean we would go out, the board would approve for us to go out and have the community vote to increase our levy beyond what's allowed by statute already. So that's when we go out for an operating referendum, a bond for a new athletic facility. We ask the community to approve that increase. So it's not just simple as having our school board raise that levy. And we don't like to do it if we don't have to, right? We want to make sure we're respecting the money we have and we're using it the best we can, and that's why we're here today, right? It's to try to review that and look at it a little deeper. So these were the enrollment projections that Sal had from July. And David, it was a good question, where did these come from? Our financial advisors have a model. This is from Ellers, one of our financial advisors. And they'll take our enrollment history using prior year data, that MARS data that we talked about, those ADMs. And then they're taking a birth rate for our county, and there's a really good correlation to the number of births in the county to how many kindergartners we get 5 years later. It's really solid connection.
Where
So
did you get the birth rate from?
just from the county, just data. Yep. So
We don't have births here anymore, is that gonna affect that?
That's a good
All of them are
question.
not in our county anymore.
it's a residence area. So where their home is.
Okay.
Right. So I can, if it's helpful in later conversations, if we're gonna really wanna look at our birth rates, that's a good thing, maybe I can bring in. And then these actually take like either a 4-year average or a 6-year average. There's different averages we can use that can change these models. And so this is just how Ehlers does it. We also have a nice trend between, I mentioned our fall enrollment number to end of year enrollment number, and some really nice trend lines that we can pull from all that data. So the enrollment trends, I don't want it to be the focus, but the big underlying theme here is that there's 2 things here. These change year to year. They change during the year. And we mentioned seat count changes every day, right? And then we're in a slow decline. And we know the next 5 years, we're gonna have fewer students unless there's some sort of, change. Right? So what would maybe change our enrollment? Maybe new business, maybe housing. There's things that could spark that, but truly in 5 years, we're probably pretty safe knowing that we're gonna see this slight decline. And it's probably better safe than sorry. Now I think everybody here would also say, we'd be part of some initiative to try and reverse that course too, right? So this is the data that Sal presented, and what I want you to kind of look at, 24-25, this was in July, our end of year projection for our APU, that's the blue line at the bottom, was looking like 3650, okay? And then as we got our end of year Mars data back, it came out at 3566. It's a little disappointing, okay? So we were riding that wave through the year, having trouble pinpointing exactly where this is. And what's important to note here is that then this new data will completely shift that trend line on what we think that enrollment might be. So the point isn't to scare everybody, the point is to say that this does fluctuate. And so if we see like, okay, in 2030, we're looking at 3310 here on the data that we had in July, but then after our end of year enrollment, now we're looking at a 3173. So there's a pretty good variance in there. But in either case, we see a slow decline based on those birth rates. Okay? So less enrollment is gonna mean less revenue for the school district, right? Yeah.
Where do the people go that your numbers decreasing, they have to go somewhere?
It's a good
Where are we
question.
losing those people?
So
Because nobody else is getting them either, it seems like they're all going down.
yeah, so it's a good question. So I think we had some conversation at a board meeting not too long ago about our open enrollment. We're losing that fight. We always really have. In this case, I think we were just move-ins, move-outs a lot last year that was really tough to follow. Some different trends that we weren't really sure what was happening. We had the reason I think we came in high in the July number is because during the middle of the school year, we were seeing a lot of really good enrollment, especially at the secondary. And then it just fell off at the end of the year. So it was something that was not really predictable. One thing we've done to try to help understand the dynamics, and I think maybe it would be a good report to share with this group too, we had a state demographer come in, her name's Hazel Reinert. She's well known for doing these studies and just kind of tried to predict how many new families will be coming to our community, that sort of data. And she basically concurred, we're gonna see a slight decline in enrollment over the next 10 years, right? But in that report, there's kind of more, I think, analysis about our community in general terms too, of what's happening. Ages of families, how many retirement families, how many are young families. She analyzed how many single family houses or multi-family houses, that sort of thing. So it's good information that maybe we can send out with the study to the group. So to answer your question, long answer, I don't really know the answer to that yet, so we'll keep.
I have a question.
Yep.
You guys do a nice job of breaking down like grade levels and all those kinds of things, but are you guys also tracking what our special education population looks like at all, like across the board, like
Yeah, our student count's going up.
fluctuation, anything? Yeah.
Yeah, so enrollment might be declining in general, and this is a big challenge for us. And I think it's really nice that we have some people with that perspective in this room. We're seeing enrollment decline across the board, but we're seeing student count in special services increase.
So then how do you also account being able to bill third-party billing and getting MA reimbursements for all those students into this?
That's a good question. I'll say in the large scheme of things, it's a really small bucket of funding that we're receiving. Third-party billings, our ability to use it's gonna go a little bit. For those that are curious, third-party billing would be like medical assistance funding that we can get if we're serving students that have needs like, maybe toiletry or changing or what other.
Speech, OT, PT.
Speech is a
Yep.
good example too, yeah. And so, there's some revenue that can come in, when we serve that, but it takes, required professionals here on our team to help us generate some of that revenue too, so. Good question. I think as we look at our student demographics, that'll be a big part of our conversation.
Mhm, spacing wise, yeah.
Okay, so I said I would look at it by school. This is a weekly report that our MARS coordinator will send out to our staff. What this, and I don't remember what day I grabbed this on. It's probably hard to see, I will send this out. Oh,
11-3.
11. Got it on the slide, all right. So, at Halverson, so for example, at Halverson, we see 2 sections of kindergarten, 2 sections of first grade, 2 of second, we have 3 in third grade, 2 in fourth grade, and 2 in fifth grade. So it's almost down to a 2-section school. So we know, as we talk, revenue is gonna be declining, right? We see that happening. We know reductions are probably going to keep continuing. I'll explain that here in a moment. Same at Sibley. We're down to a 2-section building there. But at Hawthorne and Lakeview, we still have some 3-section classes. So at Hawthorne, there's kindergarten, first, and third grade. And then at Lakeview, there's 3 sections of every grade level. So I put this slide up here for 2 reasons. One, from our capacity study, it looks like our classrooms are empty. They're not. What's happening is we're really inefficient. So let's pick a class, for example. 4th grade at Hawthorne. There's 2 sections, 30 students in the class, right? So that's probably in that wheelhouse. But if we go across the board to the rest of the schools, we don't have nearly that many students per class in 4th grade. It's about those attendance boundaries, right? But next year could be completely different. So we don't want to just go changing attendance boundaries year to year. The other thing that's really important about this is that we're down to 2 sections of each building. We can't go down to 1. That's really tough. We're gonna be 40 plus kids in a class when we go down to one section. So this is one of the first signs that we've had that we need to do something. We're getting really inefficient with staffing. It's creating like inequities across the board, right? Where we might have some students and teachers that have smaller class sizes compared to much larger class sizes in other elementary schools. And it's really challenging. We don't want that, but it's hard for us to adapt year to year. And so we're trying to stick within kind of an acceptable range for class sizes. And when we have to make reductions, it's really hard. It's really hard. Anybody have questions on this breakdown here? If you can see, it's probably a bad slide, but is there anything about specific class sizes or sections in the district at all that you have questions about?
I have a quick question. The recommended cap sizes, like minimum, maximum, we have our numbers. Is there an MDE recommended number? Like, when we say like 32 in a 4th grade or 5th grade?
For a class size,
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any Department of Education minimums or maximums on class sizes. I think they generally leave that to the discretion of the school district.
And it's a touchy subject, right? Like, there's a lot of different beliefs on it, and it's hard to say we should just, I mean, that's the easy answer, right? Just increase class sizes, but when you're in that classroom, and you all probably have your own experiences here, that creates a lot of tension and pressure, and we do have, I think, some challenges here where boundaries is one of the things we need to be talking about. But we probably want to start looking at projections with boundaries so that we don't have to do this again in a year or 2 years, that sort of thing. I'm not saying that's the answer, but it's truly creating some unique situations. The other piece is that we have special, so our special services, level 3 programs or discovery programs at Halverson. So we got a list of how many highly structured students that aren't maybe calculated into, that could be, I suppose, could be removed from your student count per class. And then at Sibley, that as well. So that's a good, thing to look at, is that as Sal presented those capacities, we got, we subtracted 96 students maybe from each of the buildings in that. So, yeah.
How do you place open enrollment students that are coming into your district?
Tanya, you wanna answer that one for me?
Sure. So as open enrollments come in, we kind of hold them, until we get all of our enrollments in. And then Danny and I meet after the first of the year. When an open enrollment, or first of the year, July 1 is what I should say. When an open enrollment comes in, a family can indicate a school of preference, but then we look at these numbers to see, is there room so that we're not pushing those class sizes too high? So we try to fill the school of preference when possible. And if we're not able to fill the school of preference, then we look at where our lower class sizes are and start there.
All right, so just to keep things moving along tonight, and I know we're gonna have a lot of discussion about these topics as we go forward. And just a quick reminder, if you have questions or follow up, and I know we're recording this and some people aren't comfortable asking questions, email, call us, or bring it up, sometime before our next meeting. Certainly open to more conversation on any of this. So, just to be transparent, the last 2 school years, we've made pretty significant reductions as a school district. And if you look at our budget reports, our revenue has actually been fairly stable, because what's happening is that we're getting a little bit more federal funds in title. We've seen a little increase in the general education formula. Went from $7,280 per APU to $7,481, something like that this year. So that revenue is ticking up a little bit, and I'd say if anything it's stable, slight decline in revenue. But what we're seeing is there's a lot of costs that are maybe out of our control that are increasing at a higher rate than that revenue. So our expenditures are just naturally increasing. So for example, transportation costs, property insurance, most of our contracted services that we have with special services, there's costs like that are just built into your system, right? And they're gonna exceed any, and they're in the driver's seat. We don't have a whole lot of control on what those costs look like. And, another big one is substitute costs. We're seeing labor laws change, which is encouraging people to be out of the school or out of work longer. And then we have naturally have to bring in subs. We can't leave our students unattended, right? So substitutes costs are skyrocketing. There's all sorts of factors impacting us that are a little bit out of our control. Okay, I'm not saying they're completely out of our control, but a little bit. So what's happened? We could maintain our budget, expenditures and revenues completely, balanced, and we still need to reduce expenditures because we're seeing expenditures that are out of our control increase a little bit in the next fiscal year. So 2 years ago, we reduced about 1.3 million. Last year, we reduced just over 2 million. So the 3.3 million that Dr. Heil mentioned is kicking things off. That's real money that's impacted our students and our staff in our district, right? So here's some things that we've done, just to kind of throw it out there so we're not kind of hitting the same things over and over. We moved the ALC to the Brookside. So now we don't have a lease payment to Riverland. There were some slight costs in that move, but overall a savings. We reduced physical mailings, it ended up being like $20,000. Pretty big chunk when you think about it, an easy one. But when we think about the big bucket of money, it's not as much, right? Realigned business office staffing, so we changed some positions there, which reduced costs. Reduced safety position, reduced communications position, reduced an energy position. We realigned special services. We reduced an administrator unit. We reduced 7 FTE. So from fiscal year 24 to 25, there was 7. Most of those were, I don't want to say not as painful, but most were like retiring or moving on, and we didn't have to cut, right? But that impacts scheduling and class sizes and everything we talked about. And then we reduced the targeted services. This last year, we reduced an executive director. We reduced our maintenance and facility staff, just, I think, 2 positions, the electrician, master electrician, we're having trouble finding one, so it was a natural, let that go. And then we had a floating custodian position that we just served in multiple buildings or as a sub, and, didn't refill that. Reduced a facilities director position to a coordinator position, we reduced administration, reduced building non-instructional supply by 10%, media center supply by 10%, and the big one, we reduced a lot of teacher FTEs again. And if we remember, staffing is the biggest mover on the budget, right? So it's 80%, we've gotta find some staff to really move the needle. So mostly in non-classroom positions, and if you look at our strategy here, we've been trying to keep away from the classroom. Really been trying. Sean Gaston, our principal at the high school, will have a message for us tonight on a video, but at the high school, it was mostly reducing overloads. So we tried to maintain as many employees as we could in the district as we made these decisions. And that's kind of been at the spirit of these reductions. The fear is, how long can we keep that up when we're down to 2 section schools, right? And so as we see this trend combined with running 6, 7 schools, how do we manage this? So these are way too, I don't want anybody to think that these are real projections right now. This is way too early. But I want to use this as an exercise to demonstrate what happens. So I talked about if we maintain our expenditures and revenues, we balance it evenly, right? If we do that, but we don't make any budget adjustments, and this is for demonstration purposes only, I don't want you to hang on to these fund balance numbers, but it's pretty close. But we have a lot of work to do yet before we can put a number out there for anybody, and that's gonna be part of this group tool. We'll make sure we're transparent about it. But if we don't make, so this yellow line would be budget reductions. So if we don't plan for any next year, the year after, and the revenue stays the same, basically we just go about our business without any reductions. We're looking at being in the deficit in 2 years, and a major hole in 3. So, with that said, we have a strong fund balance. We've been balanced, we're doing a good job as a school district. If you look at comparative data between schools, Albert Lee Schools is in a good place financially. But if we don't do our part, that's where we get in trouble. Okay, so, same message, example, this is not audited information, this is just grabbing a snapshot in time, not intended to freak people out, way too early right now. So big disclaimer there, don't think this is like official data, okay? But just for practice and demonstration purposes. So if we took the same idea, we plug in some reductions, there's some pretty heavy numbers here. 2.965 million, 2.24 million, 2.157 million. That's kind of in trend with those reductions that we determined as a district the last couple of years. It wouldn't be abnormal if this is where we landed for a point that we need to make reductions for next year. It's based off of some numbers, but again, not audited, not final data for last fiscal year. We won't want to go there until these things have not taken place. So the goal here is to remain, and our school board policy is to try to strive for a 12% fund balance. So these numbers would keep us at 12. That's how these were just calced in our projection model. But again, the data is not final yet. So here's what needs to happen first. Audit's going to be completed because of the school board in December. We settle our contracts for this current year and next year. Those are open right now with 4 units, and then we have, what, 6 more, 5 more after that? 6. So we got a lot of contracts that still need to be settled. We need to pinpoint that enrollment, update those projections. So we'll get that October 1 number in the middle of the winter. Comes out in January. And then we'll take all this information from the audit, the enrollment, the contracts. Then we go to our finance committee, review all that together. And then the school board, and we'll go to the school board with this in this group, and we establish what these targets will be. So there's a really detailed process to get there. A little bit of a scare to see something like this, but there's other levers we can pull before we get there. And there's a lot of work to be done by finance committee and myself before we even start talking about that.
Just so you all know, before July 1, when I officially started, and Paul and I started meeting at the end of April, May, and June, this is the stuff we were coming to. And I tell them this all the time. You cannot cut your way out of this. It's 80% of our budget. So you can quote me on that. You cannot cut your way out of this. And that's when we decided to call Woke. And I said, I've worked with them before in other districts, they do a great job, we're gonna call them, we'll do the capacity study, we're gonna get a task force together. You haven't heard me speak a whole lot, because what I also told Solid, and what I told them all, even the board, is I'm gonna be very quiet because I want this group to come up with some answers. And then the board and I, right, will take what it is. I don't wanna be in here doing, neither does anybody, but
We
this.
wanna be your source of information.
Right, we wanna get you the information. If you say, I want more information, I need this, I need that, that's what we're here for. But bottom line is, and granted, these numbers are somewhat made up and overinflated, but you cannot cut your way out of this.
So I think, I don't wanna say it's meant to kind of scare us all, but it's just a reality.
Serious.
It's a serious topic, that's why we're here. We know we've made millions of dollars in cuts the last 2 years, the trend's not changing. Our buildings are getting really inefficient, that's why we're here, right? And, the schools, luckily, we're in a good place financially, right? And I think we hear it at the board level and through some strategic plan conversation, we wanna be good stewards of the funds that we have, right? We're just talking about taxpayer dollar. That's why we're doing this. So, couple things for you to think about, and then I'll turn it back over to Sal to wrap this up today. Just when we talk about buildings, and I think a lot of people immediately think we're gonna close a building when we talk about this task force. Sure, that might be an idea that you might come up with. It might not be the resolve, it might not be our final answer. We've done some kind of preliminary costing of what a building costs to run, just tinkering with ideas in the past. And I'd say it's about $550,000 at each elementary school, in fixed costs, in being utilities, electrical, natural gas, sewer, water, garbage, our administrative costs, the secretary, custodial maintenance, those come along with a building to have it open, right? Then there's things like health and safety. We have to maintain fire code, ADA compliance, indoor air quality, lead and water. There's expenses that school districts have that are just, we have to make sure we're taking care of those things to best serve our staff, students, and community. We currently have 8 buildings. So we take the 6 schools, Brookside and Hammer, and typically you staff 1 custodian. This is kind of just a general rule of thumb: 1 custodian per 30,000 square feet. And we're right on pace. Like if you took this 810,377 divided by 30,000, what do you get? Like 28 and change, I think. Is that about right? So right now we have 28 custodians on staff. So we're trying to follow that norm. And you wouldn't want to see what the recommended cleanliness level of your buildings would be with that. It's unkept. It's kind of a tiered system. So they think if we staff it at that rate, the buildings shouldn't be as clean as we want them. But our staff does a tremendous job. If you walk through our elementary schools, our high school, secondary, middle school, shiny floors, garbages are dumped, floors are swept. I mean, they do a great job. The bathrooms are clean. And so really makes us appreciate what we're doing custodial wise. I think we've got the right amount of staff there. Long-term facility maintenance. So I wanted to just real briefly talk about what LTFM is. So there's a separate funding pool from the state. It's just called long-term facility maintenance. It used to be called deferred maintenance. Maybe health and safety before that. Its intent is for repairing and maintaining buildings in the condition that they are. It's not for new construction, new buildings, upgrades, anything like that. We get about $1.2 million in aid levy combination for LTFM. And the reason I kind of bring this up is that most roofs, parking lots, eat up all of your LTFM costs. So we have very little funding that we can set aside for all those health and safety pieces, fire code, just the general maintenance and upkeep of your buildings. I think our original plan to replace the roof at the high school was a 6-year plan, and we got about 3 years into it, and now we got, I think, 8 more years in the plan, because the costs are just increasing tremendously. So if you think about it, the roof at Albert Lee High School alone This year, I think we did I think it was like 30,000 square foot chunk of it. It wasn't that big, and it was 600,000 plus. It's just expensive. Like we don't have that type of revenue. And so when we see communities around us struggling with keeping the roofs from leaking, I get it. Right? It's really challenging to maintain those plants. So one other thing that we did recently, and we didn't really talk about them in our recent upgrades or construction, but in 23, the school board approved us selling deferred maintenance bonds, which are basically, we're selling bonds against our LTFM funding that comes in. So we're actually taking about $350,000 of that LTFM money every year and paying for those bonds. What it did is it allowed us to upgrade the HVAC at Lakeview Elementary, Southwest Middle School, which also feeds Sibley, which is an important thing to think about. And then the pool dehumidification unit at the high school, and what am I missing from that project? So we went to some pretty hefty costs, maintenance, HVAC maintenance that we needed to complete. So, the other project I wanted to mention recently, so we had the HVAC project in 24, we actually started in 24, we're just wrapping it up now. And then we had a 2022 project, I think the board approved in 21. We had some excess bonds from the Hammer project, about $1 million. They improved the use of those to go towards capital facilities to upgrade welcoming and safe entryways. So we really upped the security of our schools. There should be a secure checkpoint to enter every building. We're upgrading locks and doors, some cameras, stuff like that. But that's all wrapped up now. So, so those are probably the two most recent projects. So here's some little tidbits. It's been since the 1940s since enrollment has been where it currently is in Albert Lea. It's as far back as I could get. So it's been since the 40s since we've seen enrollment like today. Newest building's the high school. I wanted to reference that high school was the result of a facilities committee that got together. Thank you. Right? Hawthorne, and you walk that building, it doesn't feel that old. It really doesn't. So it's a testament again to our maintenance and custodial team. Hawthorne is our oldest building, 1951. Lakeview is in that building at Hawthorne is a tank. That thing, it holds up to everything, and those terrazzo floors, and I like the older buildings myself. Interesting enough, Lakeview, 3 floors. It's their smallest building. It doesn't feel like it, but it is the smallest in square footage. Brookside houses, and we counted this the other day, and it's really important to realize this building is challenging, and Sal mentioned all the different revisions and changes, and it's just, we've adapted and adapted and adapted over and over and over. Houses 13 different programs currently. So ECSE, early learning. So ECSE is early childhood special education. Early learning, Tiger Cub childcare, Well at Work clinic. That was one of the recent upgrades here as well. I think it was like 2014 or 15 we remodeled the clinic. Community ed, our technology department centered here, our maintenance team is centered here. Our district offices, on that map that showed district offices, the tech and maintenance I think are included in that green shadowing. Business office, special services, so our special ed department is centrally located here. And then adult ed, our 18 to 22 transitions program is here. They just did a remodel to one of the classrooms and put a commercial kitchen in upstairs. This building is just really unique. And then our area learning center. And then it's also got an annex here with some centralized storage for the district. We have a truck, we can run things around the district that way. Halverson had an addition in 2018, that was a new gym. I think you mentioned another project that was before that, might have been LED lighting and some HVAC stuff there. New HVAC installed, I mentioned. Oh, Hawthorne got a new boiler this year. Lakeview, Southwest Middle School, and the high school all got new boilers or HVAC install. The high school HVAC system is geothermal, and it's the biggest pain. We sink so much money into that every year. It's really efficient, but it's a pain. We put, I think 6 to 8 new heat pumps in every year. There's 296 heat pumps around the building. So it's just constantly chasing our tail to keep that building in shape. We added solar for part of a Solar for Schools program to Southwest Middle School, Halverson, Albert Lea High School, and Sibley, and we are realizing some savings. new roofs partially recently, but not complete. Elderly High School and Southwest Middle School. And then, I wanted to note that Southwest Middle School, heating and air conditioning, I think water all comes from, or for Sibley, all comes from Southwest. So those buildings are attached underground there, and it's good context to have. And we have a large prediction, and this one's really kind of scary to me, because these are big costs. We built a new stadium, track, turf field up at Hammer Complex in 2018. Well, all that needs to get replaced over time, right? Those costs for a new turf field, new track, parking lots, they add up. They're really expensive, and those are coming. We will be really struggling with that LTFM money to replace that, right? So we're gonna have to try to build those expenses in long term, but also roofs, parking lots, HVAC. Those are all coming too. So how do we balance all that? Some challenges.
I was just gonna say, we plan to bring more information at a future meeting about just maintenance costs across the district that, and the condition of the building. Paul, do you think we're running a little bit behind, so we could do two things? We could send the high school video out as homework between meetings?
Good idea.
Okay, I would say, or we could do it at the beginning of next meeting. Do you wanna do it as homework?
Let's do it homework. Yeah.
Okay.
Then everybody gets to know Sean. So
Yeah.
Sean Gasson, our high school
We're
principal, is gonna be
Chris
presenting
is
tonight.
technically-
And Christy will have a chance to talk here on the elementary perspective, but we just wanted Sean's face and voice to be part of this and you all to recognize him before we jump into our next meeting. So he prepared a little video. I think it's a good idea. We'll just send it out.
Yeah, we can send a link out between meetings. I'm just gonna get this erased to get ready for our, kind of the end of the meeting here. But we did want you to benefit from the perspectives of, people who lead buildings in the district. So that'll be what his video is about, but, do you mind just kind of going into life at your building, how all, obviously, I'm hoping people can see, it's a complicated picture and all these decisions are interwoven, right? So you kind of have to look at, all of these things together to talk about being a successful school district. So I'd love your
And I
thoughts
think
here.
One of the things that's unique with Halverson and Sibley is that we do have the setting 3 special education classrooms, which almost could be considered a fixed expense too, because we are legally required to have a certain number of kids with a certain number of adults that also have specific disabilities. So that gets expensive, and as our special education population keeps growing, as you say, these kids keep rolling into these setting 3 programs. We have 8 in elementary. So that gets to be quite expensive.
Can I make a comment on that? And
Yeah.
that's kind of as that count increases and we know the program's here to stay, right? We know that we're gonna have to serve these students. Our special education cross subsidy, meaning we will get revenue for special ed, aid from the state. We're exceeding that revenue by about $2.5 million in our school district. So that's an important thing. That means that's eating right into that general fund balance. And we can't just not pay for it because we have to serve those students. So there might be some efficiencies we could look at or different ways to serve them or some other options there, but that's a big part of this, is that's a strain on the budget.
It's very much so, because there's a lot of mandates on how we do it.
Yep.
And so just taking that into consideration with everything is always an expensive piece. And having, I think, how many classes are at Southwest?
Like level
Set of
3?
2?
Level 3? There's
Yeah.
2 and then there's like 2, 3 rooms.
Yeah, so it keeps growing. I've never seen 8 before. At Sibley right now, we have 4 setting 3 classrooms. One has 5 students, 2 paraeducators, 1 teacher. That is a minimum for that class to function. That's a minimum for that class according to statute. We have another class with 6 students, 2 paraeducators and a teacher. Another one, 7 students, 3 paraeducators and a teacher. Another one with 5 students, 3 paraeducators and a teacher. And you're looking at 5 students. There's 4 adults then to those 5 students. However, those 5 students require almost one-on-one. They require diapering. They require transportation within the building. They have so much heavy needs, and that is a big challenge for everyone there. We also have a lot of what we have in our specialized instruction too is a lot of training that goes along with anybody who's in those setting 3 programs. They have to be trained in how to handle de-escalation. So, and that training took, most of our staff that have already been trained 6 hours apiece, and that's outside of school time. So even the training of just running the programs is expensive. I was asked to talk about a few different things, so. Let's see. So, some of the challenges that we see, I think I mentioned most of them, but just, our staffing, we're not even able to find a lot of the licensed staff for a lot of these programs. We're requiring a lot of our staff from other buildings even to sit in on meetings because we have to have specific licensures to sit in on a lot of these meetings. So to cover everything, we have a lot of people doing a lot of different hats everywhere. The physical space of all of these places, we're taking up huge rooms that maybe don't need to be that big, but you can't legally put them in any kind of a small closet either. It has to have windows and doors and all these things that, you know, it could be changed, but how and where and when. Let's see. We've talked about the declining enrollment, but in special education, it keeps increasing. We have to follow the Individuals with Disabilities Act for everything. Our numbers just don't move. Does anybody have questions about the setting 3?
Or just elementary structures in general, I think, too. That was good, that's what I was hoping to hear from you, just to explain, I mean, there's some challenges there.
Right.
Yeah,
And I
really
know
specific.
Culberson has a little different, their setting 3 classrooms are a little different than the ones that are at Sibley, but they still have a lot of the same requirements.
Sure.
I'll ask a question, I already know the answer to, Chrissy,
Please.
but why can't you put all special education in one building?
What's your answer?
Because it's illegal. It is illegal.
So that would actually be, that would be a setting 4. So, and we don't actually have a setting 4 here. Our setting 4 for special education, we do a co-op with Austin, and so we actually have to bus students to that setting 4.
And they're facing many of the same struggles that we face too with not enough staff. So we have students that need more support
Yes.
at level 4 setting, but because they're understaffed themselves, they can't take them, which then puts a big
Correct.
strain on buildings
So I
themselves.
believe a lot of our setting 3 classes are housing some, probably technically setting 4 students. And it's just, it's all.
It's the best option you have.
Correct.
Yeah, I know it is, so yeah, we'll get there. Well, we'll keep talking about those things, and we have a video from the high school principal, that I think we're gonna send out, that, you can all maybe watch at your leisure between meetings, just talking about some of the impacts to the high school specifically, so. So to wrap up, I'll come back to this in a second. I'll just kind of tell you what we're gonna do after tonight, and then I'll go back to that and we'll close on that. So, we'll make sure you get this information, and, it got mentioned a couple times. We know it's kind of a lot coming at you, but just trying to get you kind of caught up to speed with all the like key influence factors as quickly as possible, just so that we can all be working from that same level of understanding and actually having informed discussions about what are actually the options ahead of us. So we just ask you to come back with questions or reflections, whether you bring them to the meeting or, as Paul mentioned, send them in between. We've been taking meeting minutes. You certainly could respond to those, send to Paul or Steve, whatever method you prefer. So for next meeting, we'll leave time at the beginning for what I call thoughts since last meeting, like what's on your mind, what are these questions? Have you talked to anyone out in the community, right? Like, we encourage you to, continue to be a conduit of community opinion. But we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about community engagement for getting input, right? So we can't take everyone in the community through this deep process, but we can gather more opinions about like what's critical about our school district, what must we maintain, what are some of the hopes and dreams that they would wanna see out of a process, kind of what are our non-negotiables. So we'll talk about I wrote on here recommended to be multimodal, and by that I mean, you know, might include surveys, might include listening sessions, might include, you know, showing up at a regularly scheduled meeting for a certain group of people. So start thinking about who you wanna hear from, right? You're here to represent, but like, who, you know, is there a group we should approach or make sure to get an opinion from? Obviously, parents and staff and students are pretty obvious. It got mentioned earlier as well, but you know, we wanna make sure you feel like you have data to feel confident in making decisions eventually, or recommendations eventually. So we were curious if there's any kind of peer school districts you would want us to pull statistics for you, right? Just cause we could work, you know, that's what we could do in between meetings, is bring things back to you. So you know, as you read this prompt, is there anything that comes to mind that anybody would want to? We intend it as a small group, but we're running out of time and I'm not gonna keep you late, so we can just do it as kind of call out. Is there any other districts that you would want to hear about, whether it's their financial picture or their buildings or their enrollment trends or, right?
Who are we like? What school districts are we similar?
What about Faribault, Winona?
Faribault and Winona,
Maybe 2 of them.
okay?
A little bit bigger than us maybe, but not dramatically so.
What about all Memorize, don't you?
Paul, what about?
I'm pretty proud of my ISD number.
What about Fairmont, are they?
Well, I don't know Fairmont's ISD number.
They're a little smaller, but there's some similarities that would benefit discussion.
Waseca's not too far away.
Yep, 829, Wasika.
I think I'd like to, I don't have a name or a district, but, it would, if there is districts, or if there are districts out there that, have the same trends that we have, I don't care what size they are, but, they've had 5 years of declining enrollment, their fund balance is okay, but it's looking a little shaky, what did they do?
Yeah, who's been on this path?
Yeah.
Yep.
What have other people done prior to us?
Sure. And just so I really understand, it doesn't bother you if that's not in southern Minnesota, for example?
No.
Okay. Any others?
Marshall?
Marshall. And what kind of information are people looking for? Are you looking for just, your request is pretty specific, but for some of these others, when people are calling out districts, are you looking for like, what's their enrollment trend looking like? What's their square footage looking like? Is there specific data we could bring to you? Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe more than just data, but, causality, might be interested in, yeah, there's districts that have budget issues, but why?
Sure.
Try to
Okay.
get our heads wrapped around that a little bit.
So almost like a little bit of a case study.
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe are the communities the same, such as are the communities losing population? Or are they growing?
Sure. And I do think Hazel would have some good statewide trends around that we could bring back, yeah.
Do you wanna see our Hazel study?
That's all.
You want a summary of that?
I think we just send it out.
Yeah. We'll just send it out to you. Too, so.
Did she present it at a board meeting?
No,
Okay. So we can just send out the written report?
we provided excerpts on it.
Sure, yeah.
I would like to see Alden Counter. They're a smaller district, but, we have plenty of open enrollments that go there. Just see if their space.
See what's up there, what's up over there? Okay. Just remind myself so I don't think it's ACGC here.
I think when you look at Faribault, you could pull their restructure, they restructured,
Mm-hmm.
building and then they closed it and going to
Yep.
closing the building after this year too.
And, Winona did that as well a few years back, but they went through a big restructuring for Hammonds garbage. Any others? Otherwise, we'd be happy to work on this for whether next meeting or the following, because we might have to reach out to some of these districts for, and there might not just be like a study on their website we can just download, right? But we could certainly reach out to contacts and kind of bring back whatever we can. Unrelated to this question, is there anything else people would hope to get as data? Yeah.
Could I get a paper, could be note form of, copy of PowerPoint?
For sure.
And I would really love to have, you know, any PowerPoints that are gonna be ready for this next meeting, I'd like to get them early before the meeting.
That would be nice.
That's a good idea.
Sure.
I mean, I'll swing by the office, you don't have to mail them out. You know, if you can have them here,
Yeah.
that's available.
Like I said, this video will get posted, all the information will be posted too. So if you're fine just like going online, it'll take us a little bit to get it all, but we want this so that anybody in the community can go back through and look at it.
So Jeff, just to your question, I think we should reflect a little bit on our meeting structures before each, so we can ensure that those materials are ready
Yep.
on the timeline, so.
Yeah, they
we'll-
might not
we'll
be
think
ready,
about that a
you know,
little bit.
weeks in advance, right? But yeah, we can work on that.
We'll figure
Yeah, we have
something
like planning meetings in between, so we'll look at that. I don't think, you know, tonight will be by far the biggest data dump meeting, right? And then we'll have some based on this request here. I think after that, it'll be a lot of more input, collaboration, brainstorming together, but I appreciate the request.
Along with all of those places you're getting information from, will you also get, like how they structure their building setups?
Sure, as a part of that, yeah, so.
Like if they had to reduce, like what did their buildings actually look like when they were done?
Sure. All right, well, I know we're at time. I appreciate it very much. Happy to hang back and answer any questions for anyone. Otherwise, our next meeting is the 25th, I think it is?
That's that Tuesday meeting.
Yeah, that'll be on Tuesday, the 25th, just because of Thanksgiving that week. So, thank you all.
Thank you all.